Oh,
Um,
hi.
so we're live on Facebook. What's up, everybody? Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Sean Wilson. I am the Smart Justice Campaign Manager for the ACLU of Wisconsin. I know it's been a long time since we had these town halls. I know it's been a long time since we gave you all something to snap your fingers to and nod your heads to. But tonight we're back at it to do a recap of the budget hearings that the ACLU of Wisconsin and our coalition partners traveled all around the state, um, raising our voices to demand that Wisconsin's 2021-23 biennial budget reflects the will of the people, one that is grounded in justice, equity, and an investment in communities, and especially in marginalized communities. Despite the decision to hold this year's hearings in locations far from Wisconsin's most populous areas, and although attendance at in-person Joint Finance Committee budget hearings was lower due to the pandemic, the people of Wisconsin's message remained clear that this budget should invest in healing and divest from harm. We heard powerful testimony from people in Whitewater, Rhinelander, and Menominee who said that the current system desperately needs to change. Some of our interns also attended the virtual hearing, and that message was resounding in that space. And so tonight, I'm joined by some of my colleagues as well as our coalition partners to just talk a little bit about what we saw, what we heard, and also how important it is for folks to continue to engage in this process until a budget is signed that reflects all of our values. And so without further ado, I'll pass it to my panel to introduce themselves, starting with Melissa Luden.
Hey, everybody. So my name is Melissa Luden. I am the regional organizer for Fox City's Oshkosh area for the Smart Justice Campaign with the ACLU.
Thank you. Amelia?
Hi, my name is Amelia Barrett. I'm based in Milwaukee, and I'm an organizer with the Wisconsin Public Education Network.
Thank you. David?
Everybody, I'm David Carlson. I'm a regional organizer with the ACLU of Wisconsin Smart Justice up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Thank you, David. And Peggy West Schroeder.
Hi, I'm Peggy West Schroeder. I'm the statewide campaign coordinator for Expo, Ex-Incarcerated People Organizing, and I am also located in Milwaukee.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you. So we know that the state budget process didn't snatch any headlines. It didn't pop up on the nightly news. However, it is the single most important responsibility that our elected officials have. We know that the budget determines how we approach our most pressing public priorities, impacting everything from infrastructure and education to criminal justice and the environment. And so I know I saw each of you at all of these hearings. Many of you also testified. In addition to you all showing up at the meetings, we also spent weeks and months providing trainings to the people of Wisconsin, helping them understand what the budget process is, and also helping them develop a story that they can share in front of our elected officials on why these issues are important to them. And so anyone, who wants to talk a little bit about the hearing that they attended, and also some of the stories that, stuck out, some of the testimonies that you heard. Could you talk a little bit about that and how you think those testimonies resonated with our elected officials? Anyone can hop in and answer that.
I'm happy, I think, to go. So the one that I attended was in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. For our location with Northeast Wisconsin area we recognize that as being 2 hours away. But I want to say, we were able to see at least 18 people showed up to that hearing in person who spoke and testified on criminal justice reform issues. Some of the people that I was working with, our leaders, many of these people, this was their first time participating in the budget, learning about the importance of the budget, why their story and their voice matters. We also, I think, recognize there was many other people that wanted to be involved for their first time as well, but unfortunately couldn't because, COVID is still real. And due to people's schedule, unfortunately, they weren't able to get off of work. But for the people that were able to come, just hearing Julie and Lance, I really want to highlight from this area because they really talked about treatment and diversion being a need in our state. We call it TAD, so treatment and diversion, as preventative, so people can participate in that. And so part of that budget ask is requesting to have that $15 million expansion in treatment and diversion. Also, it was also mentioned in their stories, the issues regarding crimeless revocation in our state. For Lance's story, uniquely, he's a business owner. He came to state his experience of owning a business, and unfortunately, due to an employee and a retaliation issue, caused him to be revocated on hearsay, resulting really just with an alcohol-related issue. And with that, I think we found that it moved many of the Joint Finance Committee members in hearing this, because we don't often hear, how does a business owner have something like this happen to him? As well as, Lance's emphasis on, for example, he sees the need for treatment and diversion. Julie, for example, came in also too with a powerful story, her first time coming in and sharing with everybody her experience and her request for trauma-informed approaches. So many of the other people that we saw that also testified, there were some other powerful people too, but I just wanted to highlight Julie and Lance because it was their first. But again, coming in and really highlighting the need for treatment and diversion expansion. We don't need to be sending these people to prison. We know that many of these people that go to prison don't even get the opportunity for any type of treatment. So, but yeah, I think certainly a shout out to this area for the people that were able to attend. I want to highlight, I think that we're one of the loudest in the room. We were, clearly heard, and I'm just happy for those that were able to participate with us.
Thank you, Melissa. Peggy, you want to talk a little bit about what you saw and how Expo, ex-incarcerated people organizing, engaged around this budget process, and how you all prepared as well?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I attended all 3 hearings. The one obviously that's closest to Milwaukee was Whitewater, which is still 45 minutes away. And so you can't really thwart the fact that that's intentional. There were not a lot of people of color in any of the rooms that I was in. In fact, in Menominee, for most of the time, I was with Ramaya Whiteside, my colleague, and we were the only 2 people of color in the room for, a lot of that hearing. Obviously, Sean was there, but not always present in the room, and then we left. So, maybe there were more people that came. But there were several speakers that got up and spoke about the fact that, formerly incarcerated people that are directly impacted, justice impacted people are working during the day. And so not only are you asking us to take off of work, you're asking us to drive clear across the state. And there are issues with that as well. People being able to get permission, a travel permit to be able to leave their county, if that's what they need to do. And some people do. And so we had developed a school of democracy early on. We started training people. We did storytelling. We wanted for people to be able, like Melissa said, with Lance, to share their story, to be able to speak from their lived experience. And so we had the biggest presence in Whitewater. And then again, as we traveled away from Milwaukee, we had just a couple people at a few, we'll say a few, not a couple, we'll say a few people in Rhinelander and in Menominee, but definitely not enough. We were sorely disappointed with the outcome, and the fact that in the executive session tomorrow, they plan to really remove anything that has to do with criminal justice reform in this state at all. We're really pleased with the budget that the governor put forward. We were hoping that they would listen to the people of Wisconsin. At some point we all just have to stand up and say we're tired of being, embarrassed as in the United States, here in Wisconsin, where we seem to be going backwards versus forward. And so I know that our leaders, especially those who took the time to get off and to speak, like Ron Schrader, who spoke about revocation, who's been deeply affected by revocation, physically, emotionally, financially, by revocation, spoke. And then to find out that that is going to be taken out of the budget when it truly is a budget issue, obviously that's deeply disappointing. So we heard a strong cry from across the state that it is time to do criminal justice reform in this state, and unfortunately that fell on deaf ears. So we'll have to pick up and continue that discussion in another means.
Thank you, Peggy. Let's tap Amelia from Wisconsin Public Education Network. Could you talk a little bit, Amelia, about what you all saw at these hearings? I know we were there from the start, so could you share a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I was able to attend all 3 hearings. Education advocates overall had a very good showing, with about 48% of all overall testimony being in favor of public education. Now, a lot of that is due to we have a strong retired community, grandparents and such who don't work during the day. And then administrators and stuff usually are their own bosses and are allowed to leave to testify. So we're lucky that our community has a little bit more flexibility. But overwhelmingly, Wisconsinites came out in favor of public education and in favor of Governor Evers' budget proposals. We at the network are also excited by a lot of what Governor Evers had in the budget, specifically the $200 per pupil increase, and then also the special education increase. What a lot of people don't know about how special education works is because that's federally mandated. Schools, to cover the gap, take out of their general education fund and are often required to cut programming, different staff, whatever they're forced to cut in order to cut those costs. When we invest in special education, what we're actually doing is putting those dollars back into the general education fund, back into those other programs, staff, whatever that local district may need. And so that increase in special education is super important for all students. Now, the chairs have suggested that the increase in special education is too much money and is unsustainable. I think it is morally wrong to suggest that funding children's education is too expensive. On top of that, it's just objectively not. There are lots of things in the budget that could pay for this increase, including closing the prisons like the ACLU and other groups like Expo have suggested. Accepting Medicaid expansion, accepting that federal money. I think we're only one of 2 states who don't accept that federal expansion, so that would free up a lot of funds. And then finally, the legalization of cannabis and releasing nonviolent drug offenders, and then getting that tax revenue and investing it back into the community rather than into, punishment. And so we're really happy here at the Wisconsin Public Education Network to partner with the ACLU. The school to prison pipeline is a really big issue, and we together kind of work both ends of that system. And it's unlikely, but we really do hope that the joint finance will listen to the will of the people, because it was overwhelmingly in our favor.
Thank you, Amelia. And last but not least, to share his thoughts, David Carlson, you want to talk about what you heard and seen at UW Stout?
Yeah, thank you. I would just echo what everybody's already said. A couple of things that Amelia said, I kind of want to lift up. The morality of this issue is a big sticking point for me. I'm one of the leaders from our area that that testified was actually her son was a victim of a brutal assault. And, after the time that she had to process, what had occurred to her son, and seeing how that process was playing out with law enforcement through the courts, et cetera, that this individual that perpetrated this crime would simply be locked up for a period of time, get out, and be the same person or worse in most cases. And as a mother, she communicated that she just doesn't want to see people go through what she went through. So whatever is the most effective way, which is not incarceration, and she stated this, is not incarceration has proven time and again to not work. And so incarceration just continues to perpetuate what's happening to me right now, the things that I'm feeling as a mother. And what we see from the media and from law enforcement is they take a lot of victims of crime immediately when they're still stuck in their anger, and they're like, oh, we want harsh penalties. Well, you're angry. So yeah, at the time you want harsh penalties, but you take that anger away and you realize that anger begets nothing but anger. And so I think that her testimony was extremely impactful, and for these budget items to be, taken off the budget or taken out of the budget, it's a direct, it's an insult. It's an insult to the community. It is a moral issue. And these elected representatives that are sitting listening to these stories, they're fooling people. They're telling people that one thing works when it has proven that it has not. We spend over $800 million a year in incarceration in Wisconsin. I think the number is around like 42 billion. 2015, it was like 42 billion nationwide on prisons. What we're asking for in Wisconsin is 15 million per year, 30 million over the next 2 years for treatment alternatives and diversion programming. What does that look like? That could be veterans court, for instance. We got individuals out there that are veterans that came back from combat with post-traumatic stress disorder, get locked up, and they have no treatment. So then the only alternative for them is either an earned release program or veterans court or something of that sort. Well, now they're not going to have that in a lot of cases. It's not going to be expanded. So these elected representatives that listen to the stories from voters and that chose to just, basically, throw their stories back in their face, it's disgraceful. And we as a community, we as the public, we need to find a way to fight that. We got to take this into our own hands and make sure that this doesn't stand. So that would be what I would add on. And Patty is a leader from this area that testified. Her testimony was remarkable.
Yeah, and I definitely want to echo that. Patty had a powerful testimony, and as David mentioned, that she was a victim. And one of the things that this criminal legal system conveys to the public is that oftentimes the victim wants these individuals to be shipped away and the key to be thrown in the nearest river. And that is not always the case. And it's not always the case because a lot of victims want to understand, why me? Why did you perpetrate this act of violence against me? And oftentimes the court system does not provide an opportunity for that closure to occur for the victim. And so the victim goes away trying to figure out how to deal with the trauma that they've experienced, that they're experiencing as a result of this crime, this violent act being perpetrated against them. And the perpetrator is sent away to languish in a jail cell. So no one wins here. And so that's the way that our criminal legal system has operated for years, and that's the way it continues to operate. And that's why you hear a lot of conversations about the need for restorative justice, the need to repair harm, to rebuild community. That is what our criminal legal system needs to be focusing on. The system actors within our criminal legal system need to really begin to reimagine what justice looks like and how to really begin to rebuild the perpetrator as well as the victim of these acts of violence. And so I really appreciate Patty coming out and sharing her testimony, and for our elected officials to sit there, and one of her elected official, in fact, was one of the committee members, to sit there and listen to this story and to be in agreement with the removal of all of these proposals that can significantly impact our justice system in Wisconsin is an insult. David gave us the numbers, over 800 million, and the acts that many folks presented to the JFC committee was a increase to increase TAD funding. We're literally begging for treatment. We're literally begging our elected officials to invest in healing and not to invest into the continued shipping individuals into a system where they're just going to sit and not deal with the issues in which they're faced with. And so that's problematic, and we have to continue to rise up and speak out and engage our elected officials around this issue. We have the ability to send them emails. We have the ability to make phone calls to them. And I encourage all of our viewers and our attendees on this Zoom to call your elected officials, to email your elected officials. If you see them out at the grocery store, ask them, why are they supporting the removal of these proposals that will move our state forward, and hold them accountable. Hold them accountable at the ballot, with your ballot. And so moving on, if no one else wants to add to that piece of the conversation, let's delve a little bit deeper into the budget process itself. The last budget cycle, we had standing room only at many of these hearings. And these last 3 hearings, we were able to track testimony, and I believe there were probably about 200, probably average, what would you say, Amelia, about 200 folks testifying?
Even less than that. I think the highest day was about 200, averaging more like 120 to 150 a day.
And
then,
many of these, go ahead.
And then the virtual one obviously filled up within the 15 minutes. And I think the max, that was maxed at 200 spots, if I remember correctly. So those 200 spots were filled up, and then no other spots have been offered, and I don't think will be offered.
Yeah, and that just speaks to listen, many of these folks traveled. I know we traveled 2, 3, 4 hours from Milwaukee to many of these locations because we knew that the likelihood of folks having the privilege to travel that far, having the privilege to take off work to travel that far and to provide testimony was going to be slim to none. And we were able to see that when we tracked testimony. At each of these hearings, we had an average of probably 5 or 10 at the most. In some areas, I believe Whitewater, we had about 21 people who testified in favor of these proposals. But we wanted to make sure that the issue of criminal justice reform was front and center, and that we wanted them to know that not only were we traveling this distance to make sure that the people of Wisconsin voices were being heard, but we also wanted to inform them that the ACLU has members, supporters, and volunteers in each of their districts. And we were going to be sure that we keep them informed on how this budget process unfolds and ensure that they hold them accountable by emailing them, by calling them, and by engaging them in the electoral process. And so what are some things that you all think folks should do, could do, and how are your respective organizations thinking about engaging around the issue of holding our elected officials accountable, or just, letting them know that what they're doing is not okay? Peggy, I know I received the email from Expo, so I'll call on you to kick us off, but I definitely received the email from Expo Wisdom talking about
Yeah,
encouraging folks to email. So could you talk a little bit about that?
definitely. So we obviously were, super, I don't even have a word for it, disappointed on the umpteenth level. Not only that with the fact that they plan to go forward with in-person hearings, which right away screams, we don't really want to hear from people, but then to have only one virtual hearing and to have that one close in 20 minutes is ridiculous. Then to add insult to injury, come Friday, your written testimony is due by 12 noon, and an hour later, 1 hour later, they have the whole executive summary written up already saying we're rejecting all of these things we believe to be policy. You know, when I heard you describe the state budget, one of the biggest things your state budget is it's a moral document. It speaks to what's important to your state. And as David said, in our state, we spend more money incarcerating people than we do educating them. UW system was there. I mean, there were tons of people from UW system there begging for these scraps. Well, you know what? The school system begging for scraps. If you would just, stop revocating people, if 38% of the people going into your criminal justice system each year,
Am I the only one who doesn't hear Peggy, or you all as well?
I think she froze.
Yeah, she's frozen.
There you go.
Okay,
I'm back.
You back.
Okay, all right,
Zoom.
sorry. But what I was saying is, it's telling me my internet's unstable. Now it's too late to tell me that. What I was saying is that, if we didn't have incarceration as such a high priority in the state, we would have money for other things, more important things. But so what Expo is doing is we're going to have a presence tomorrow in the Capitol. We definitely are going to the Capitol. We're going to get there at 10 o'clock. We want for the legislators to see us as they're going into the Capitol to do whatever dirt they're going to do. We want them to know we're standing outside. And then we are also encouraging everybody starting at 11 o'clock to call all of the Republican members of the Joint Finance Committee. And we're targeting the Republican members because obviously they're the people that have the control. And they're frankly the people that we have gotten the most resistance from. If you listen to the stuff that comes out of their mouths when they are, discussing criminal justice, they clearly don't have a good handle on what's actually going on in state. And so we want to make sure that they're hearing, again, from people with lived experience. And so, we've sent our members to call. We also want them to call and talk to their own representatives and let them know that this isn't acceptable. And again, that, we don't want to live in a state that makes incarceration a priority.
Thank you, Peggy.
Yes.
Amelia, do you want to talk a little bit about what Wisconsin Public Education Network is encouraging folks to do in response to this big reveal tomorrow morning?
Yeah,
well,
so right now, we're suggesting that everyone call and let their local representatives know that they like what's in the budget and that you're hoping that your local representative, whenever the budget comes into their discussion zone, will be pushing, complaining, knowing what their constituents wants, and it's what we want. The second thing is we're not entirely sure how we're going to hold them accountable yet. We're still workshopping that. 2 years ago, when they did this exact same thing, we held a 60-mile march from Palmyra, Wisconsin to the Capitol. It took 4 days. It was very cool. It was semi-effective. We got a little bit of press, and the governor did give us some funding with his veto pen, but it didn't move the legislature at all. We're not going to do that again, just with COVID and the effort and the timing. Last year we threw that together, I kid you not, in 2 weeks, and it was a crazy 2 weeks. So we're still workshopping that. If anyone has any grand, cool ideas on, how to make a splash, we would be happy to hear it. But in the times of COVID, we are just, concerned about doing the most impactful things are usually in person, right? And that's a struggle right now.
Thank you, Amelia. And also, for folks who are viewing us on Facebook, my colleague Molly Collins dropped in the Facebook chat all of the folks that you can call. So the co-chairs, Representative Bourne, Senator Mark Line, and the other folks on that committee, those numbers are in the Facebook chat. And so folks can reach out to those folks directly via email or phone call. I strongly encourage folks to do that because, again, as Peggy said, this budget is a moral document. These are your tax dollars. And so they should definitely take to heart everything that folks said to them at these hearings, in addition to the testimony that has been submitted via email, the voicemails that have been left, as well as the testimony that was shared during the during the virtual hearings. And so, tapping my colleague, David Carlson, what are some of the things that you think you're going to encourage your leaders in your region to do around this? I'm sure you have, some ideas of how you're going to encourage folks to turn out to, hold our elected officials accountable, especially given that one of the committee members represents the Eau Claire area. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Individuals in this area, one thing we focused on building up to these JFC hearings was personal development. So for the leaders that came forward, individuals that came forward, learning to, give their testimony, these training opportunities were really a way to empower them, right? Because we wanted them to realize that, this empowerment, it's inside you already. You have the lived experiences, you have everything that you need to take this fight on. And so, going to like a JFC hearing like we did, it can be demoralizing if you don't have that foundation built and you feel that, okay, I've done something to improve myself. So regardless of what their reaction is to my testimony, I know that I'm becoming a better person. And whether or not they're becoming better, that's their problem. Well, now moving past those JFC testimonies, we have a lot of energy in this area now. And so now at the local level, we're planning on making sure that our local elected officials are hearing us and hearing where we want this money spent. Because you never know what local official is connected to that state representative that may be on one of these committees. You never know who you're going to be speaking to that maybe gets you an audience with someone that's going to be able to make that decision. And so we're just going to keep on in the Eau Claire County area, Chippewa Valley area. We're going to keep on letting our voice be heard that we want money funding treatment alternatives and diversion programming. We want money funding earned release programming. And that's what we're going to do. And if all else fails, at least in this session, at least everybody that participated is going to be stronger because of it. And with that, there isn't a loss taken then.
Thank you, David. Melissa, as well, you're in the Fox Valley region. I'm sure you have some ideas as well as how we're going to engage the volunteers and supporters in that region as well around this issue.
Right. I know. So for some of us, and I echo, certainly what David Carlson says. This was certainly a moment of, leadership development. These skill sets that a lot of these leaders learned is something that they can take with them and continue to utilize. I would say most importantly, with some of these people's stories and the way that they could tell is, for me, some of the conversation we've had with some of our leaders is really kind of cutting out some of that testimony and highlighting some key points of their testimony and possibly creating a video to really be able, I think, to share it, to highlight, to legislators specifically, this is what was really touched on. And these were the key takeaways from some of these stories. But also too, we have some leaders in Fox Valley who are going to listening sessions. There's still listening sessions being held by some of the Republicans within my area. And just to kind of echo, I think what Peggy said is there is a need to continue to educate our legislators. They don't know the criminal justice system like we do. They rely on us for that education. That is a key thing that we're doing. We had somebody, Lisa Hahnemann, who did a records request with the Department of Corrections just to point out to her legislator, Representative Murphy, that, we do have people in prison in our state for marijuana convictions because he doesn't believe that that exists. So, she went and dug in and got that research, and I believe she already sent it to him, but those are some things that we need, because right now we have people making decisions in our state that either A, don't have the education, or are not looking at it the way that we need them to be looking at it, because it's super important. Like with many of the people that echoed this, we need to be investing in healing. We know from experience, whether a family member or from us, the prison system doesn't work. It doesn't solve issues to why people go there. And we can't stress that enough. So really, I think for us is really the education, making sure our legislators here have the education, as well as they're hearing the stories. So that's what we're going for here.
Thank you, Melissa. So once the governor's budget was introduced, folks, everyone on this call, we began pushing even harder, advancing the case for constructive criminal justice reform. And for the folks who are listening or who just tuned in, some of the things that we were advocating for was legalizing cannabis, promoting police accountability, investing in substance abuse and mental health treatment, in diversion programs, raising the age of adult criminal prosecution to 18, and closing Lincoln Hills and Copper Lake youth prison here in Wisconsin, which was scheduled to close July 2021. That is not happening, but we lifted that back up for our elected officials. In addition to closing down that youth prison, we were also advocating and asking our elected officials to close down Green Bay Correctional Facility, a facility that I spent a little bit over 4 years in, and is a building that needs to be tore down, not just closed. It continues to exacerbate the trauma of its residents. And if you want to know a little bit more about this facility, just drive past, and I'm sure you would think it's a building out of a Harry Potter novel. So check that out, and I'm sure you would agree that this facility needs to be not only closed, but tore down for the amount of money that it's costing Wisconsin taxpayers, but more so because of the trauma that it is causing the residents that reside there. We joined with Wisconsin Public Education Network by illustrating through the through line between the expansion of mass incarceration, divestment from public schools, and the pervasive racial disparities present within both systems. And so it was only right that we join forces with Weapon, as my former colleague Jared affectionately referred to you all as. And so it was a joy to join forces with Wisconsin Public Education Network, because we know that you all are committed to these issues. And you all turned your people out, and we all turned our people out. And so we appreciate you all, and we're definitely encouraging folks to hold our elected officials accountable by emailing them, by calling them, and engaging them at every level possible. Amelia, could you talk a little bit about some of the testimony that you heard personally that resonated with you, whether it was a testimony on criminal justice reform, education? Could you talk a little bit about, some of the testimony that you heard particularly?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, not to put you on the spot, but Sean's testimony really stands out. It was really incredible. He testified every single time, and at the third one, he was very comfortable, and the committee was like laughing with him. And I think that really shows, how you build those connections and how they start to listen to you more. Secondly, for education, there was 2 mothers from Madison who run an organization called Madtown Mamas, and they're disability rights advocates, and they had really a good, beautiful chunk of testimony where they not only testified about their experience navigating the special education system as parents, but also their children stepped up to the mic and testified, which was very powerful about their educational experiences. The parents' names are Martha Saravo and Anna Hauser. Those testimony videos are up on our Facebook page. Feel free to share them and spread them out. They're very powerful. But you know, there was so much. It's overwhelming, but those are the ones that really stand out to me.
Thank you, Amelia. And David, my brother from another mother, definitely shared a powerful testimony in addition to Patty, but most folks probably don't know David's story. He's a veteran, and I definitely was moved by his testimony, and I'm sure many of the committee members were moved by his testimony as well, and probably were even surprised that he is a former veteran, that he is a veteran, and he has been impacted by this system. And we're asking them to make these investments into treatment and diversion programs. And it's obvious that, you know, in that moment, it may have resonated, but their actions are showing that it went through one ear out the other. But David, in addition to Patty's testimony that you shared early on about it resonating with you, could you talk a little bit more about some of the other testimonies that you may have heard? I know you brought up to UW Stout some leaders who you've been working with up in the Eau Claire area. Could you talk a little bit about some of their testimony, because those were powerful testimony as well?
Yeah, there was a couple that I'd like to uplift that didn't get a chance. There were several individuals that didn't get a chance to testify, and they had recorded previously with me short snippets of their testimony. One in particular was, and a lot of people throughout Wisconsin probably don't even know about this, or, you know, is probably, you know, it was overshadowed by everything happening towards the end of the Trump administration. But I had, you know, one of my really close friends, long-term friends, when the Hmong refugee population, a lot of their refugee statuses were discontinued because of criminal convictions. And I had one of my friends, he has a kid, same age as my kid, 2 years old, has a family, is right now the breadwinner for that family while his wife is in school. And when that occurred, he was looking at deportation to Laos, you know, out of nowhere. He's going to get snatched away from his family and deported to Laos. And that is something that is that insecurity that he feels. You know, I couldn't even imagine how that would feel, knowing that, you know, within a week I could be, and he got a final order of deportation. So within a week, I could be gone and not seeing my kid again, you know, for however long, maybe never again. And so that instability, that just goes to show the state a lot of people are living in when no resources are provided. This individual obviously fell into this cycle, and people know, you know, the history of the Hmong population in a lot of this region of Wisconsin. They fought for our military, right? They helped us in Vietnam, and now, you know, have experienced some of the same conditions that a lot of African Americans growing up in poverty experience. And a lack of resources lead to, you know, you act out in some cases, or you do what it takes to survive criminal convictions. So then no resources coming back into the community, and it's just a person lives in this complete state of insecurity in life. And as you build a family, as you have children, as you have a career, all of that can be snatched away from you in one heartbeat, right? And so what these resources do is it gives you a buffer. It gives you a little bit of security in life. You can start making your way. I can get my work visa, or in his instance, his work visa. Not me, I'm a citizen, but he can get his work visa. He can start contributing. He can buy a house. He has property. This is stuff that he can do once resources are dedicated to him and to his community. And so I know that wasn't the one that got spoken on at the budget testimony, but I want people to hear that, because it's a small category of people that this falls on. But as long as these resources are being hoarded by these elected representatives, people like this are living in 1 second to the next, 1 day to the next in insecurity. And I think it's really important that we realize that.
Thank you, David. Just let that sit in. Just let that sit in right there. Melissa, you want to share a little bit about some of the testimony that you heard at UW Rylander? You also had a powerful testimony. You also mentioned two of your leaders' testimony early in your remarks. But are there other testimonies that you heard that you want to lift up, or any testimonies that folks may have shared with you who weren't able to either participate or who may have submitted testimony via email or video recording? Please do share.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly shout out to Wendy, that WayJ group. There was some powerful people, I think, that came to talk about, we need to stop sentencing 17-year-olds as adults. Some of those stood out. Shout out to Ben Turk and his team for coming out. They started out being the loudest in the room. And they came, and I believe that they were at every single one. They traveled to every single hearing. There were people, I really want to give highlight Sherry Brenham. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to come with us to Rylander, but she made it in the virtual hearing, and just, I think, highlight and uplift her story a little bit. Her story was shared 2 years ago. She came to the joint finance hearing with us 2 years ago for the first time. But this one is powerful because I think as a woman, and how women end up in the criminal legal system is, and it's okay if I share a little bit of this with you. Part of hers is that, she went to her doctor after she found out she was pregnant to be able to start taking Suboxone, and so she could no longer be using. Her agent found out about that and put her on a hold. So her taking the steps to initially get herself in a stable situation that way, her agent placing her on a hold. Part of that problem is that we only have 13 beds in the state of Wisconsin for a pregnant woman for a treatment center. That has not changed. That didn't change 2 years ago when we talked about this, but she came forward to say that. And I think, if we had those programs, in her case, she had to get sent to prison and go through delivering her child and having her child being taken away. And so she really, again, I think, came hard with that story. But most people don't know that those situations, I think, exist. I know Tamara Ullman really gave a powerful story too, talking about treatment and diversion as the need. And, Tamara comes from Fond du Lac County. And, there were other people who, certainly submitted, Lisa Hahnemann. There were several people, I think, that we worked with that tried to get in where they could. But just to highlight, I think, some of those individuals, I believe, Morgan Phillips was also somebody that came with us as a AODA counselor, again, requesting to have treatment and diversion. So many different people, whether lived experience or somebody who is a person that is in the service work, because we heard a lot of that, whether you're AODA counselor, in that field for treatment and substance use, many people, support that need. So certainly a strong presence for that here. But again, I think shout out to Sherry on that, because it's really unfortunate. 13 beds in the state for women. So.
Thank you, Melissa. Peggy, you want to talk a little bit about some of the testimony that you heard? Expo was definitely in the building. And so I'm sure you've heard some testimony while you were attending all of the hearings. Do you want to share?
I think, yeah, we did. Well, we definitely, like I said, we did storytelling, and we were trying to encourage people who have really strong stories, like some of the ones that Melissa mentioned, to really come and to testify. We always are amazed by the power that people with lived experience have with our legislators. Even if it's, even if it's fleeting, even if they're, like, oh my goodness, yeah, we definitely need to do something about this. And then kind of forget. at Whitewater, I would say probably 90% of the people that we had testifying were testifying and had real lived experience with revocation. And again, revocation is devastating, you know, to be plucked out of your life and to lose your job, to lose your housing. In one case, one of our, he's my colleague, lost his car, and he was actually living in his car, and he had sued for the right to be homeless, you know, coming out of prison. And all of that's just ridiculous. And to have someone stand up and share that story and say, you know, this is what revocation does, and then to have, you know, the whole committee, not the whole committee, but to have the majority of the committee then just say, you know what, we're just blatantly going to ignore this. You know, again, it's really hurtful. Hurt people. And until traumatized people traumatize people. And until we can get the legislature in the state of Wisconsin to understand that and to put resources where they really need to be, we're just going to continue to be, you know, a revolving door with our prison system. And that's a shame. It's a shame on a lot of levels. There is a lot of talent sitting behind those walls that should be out here in the community, that could be out here in the community and could be putting us forward as, you know, as a community, and it's not happening. And, you know, the legislature should be the number one people in a state that should be worried about that. You know, it shouldn't be you and I and our organizations pushing people forward. The legislature should be coming to us and saying, how do we get this done so that we're not making, you know, we're not making more prisons. We're not making more people go to prison. But, you know, so I heard a lot of testimony again with people who have really great ideas on how to make this not happen. And the governor, again, to applaud the governor for his budget. The governor had a lot of great ideas on how to not make this happen. And of course, the governor's DOC budget was submitted by Secretary Carr. So my hat's off to him as well, you know, for being forward thinking and for not saying, you know, we're going to do what we've always done, because this budget definitely wasn't that. And to see this Joint Finance Committee treat it the way that they have, it's just extremely disappointing.
Thank you, Peggy. And so we're coming up on the 7:30 hour. And so if folks have any closing remarks that they want to share, something that you want to say to our viewers, our supporters, please feel free to unmute yourself and do so before we close out. And anyone can kick it off.
I just want to close by saying that today is Cinco de Mayo, and as a Latina, as a Mexicana, you know, today is an important day because today is the day that my country taught a bigger, badder country that you have to know your role. And so bigger's not always badder. And so we need to make sure that we are sending that message to the legislature. You work for us. You need to hear us. The will of the people is what you are responsible for delivering. So please don't, it's not over till the fat lady sings. Call your representative, come to the Capitol, sit on the steps, write a letter, write an email, do whatever it is that you need to do in order to make your will known to your legislators.
Thank you, Peggy.
I just like to highlight that Wisconsin is one of the worst places to grow up if you're a Black child. We do not fund, we're one of the worst funders of education. We're one of the, of special education. We're one of the worst funders of English language learners, and we spend the most on incarceration. Those things are connected. That's not a coincidence. We need to start investing our money where our values and our morals are. And our legislators, thank you, need to know that that's what we want. And we need to like do it so much that they are like overwhelmed and annoyed and like can't sleep at night because like their phones and their emails are dinging so much. So I really hope that we can all do that because it's very important.
Thank you, Amelia. David, Melissa, any closing remarks?
Yeah, I just want to close with, I'll take it one step further. It's definitely not a coincidence, because I believe that, the current state of incarceration in Wisconsin and throughout the United States, the current over policing, the militarized policing of communities of color, especially, this is what perpetuates the violence, the addiction, and the suffering in our communities. It is directly responsible. So a vote for funding more of those resources is a vote for more violence, more addiction, more suffering. So, I mean, I guess you can choose your side on that one. And I'll close with that.
All right, I can go quick. I think just to, really reiterate, you heard from Peggy a couple moments ago of, the governor, along with Secretary Carr of the Department of Corrections, put that budget into the budget for our state. And I think that's something to recognize. You're not only hearing it from the man that oversees the Department of Corrections, but you're hearing it from people with lived experience. You're hearing it from people as to what these problems are and what the solutions are. And right now we have decision makers, for whatever reason, are not listening. So I also want to quickly highlight, like, we have a whole new group of people that are part of this process now. It wasn't like this maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago. We have new voices, we have new faces. We're bringing a whole bunch of new people, I think even too for public education and all the other things. So with that being said, I just encourage everybody to keep that momentum. We're not done by a long shot with this, and please contact your elected officials. Let them know that these are concerns for you. If you need education or anything else from any one of us, we're all here. Feel free to reach out, but please reach out to your legislators and let them know that they need to, vote for a just budget for our state as a whole.
Thank you, Melissa. Listen, folks, we know, the people of Wisconsin know, that we cannot build a more just state without a budget that sets out to do the same. Understanding that this process provides an opportunity to change the course of our state for the better. We heard medical professionals, psychologists, and those struggling with substance abuse share personal stories about how the addiction crisis has impacted their lives. Formerly incarcerated people not only shared testimony, but helped us lead the charge, testifying about expanding access to quality treatment instead of incarceration. That was the answer to this epidemic. We provided them the answer. We listened to people sentenced as adults for crimes they committed as 17-year-olds, recall traumatic incidents they experienced in adult correctional settings, highlighting the need for youth to be treated differently in the legal system. We heard from people from all walks of life who traveled around the state to demand that our racist and ineffective system of mass incarceration be dismantled. We heard from educators, principals, deans, school superintendents, and school staff from around the state who expressed support for more resources to be allocated to Wisconsin's public schools to ensure that all Wisconsin students, regardless of race, disability, and background, have the same opportunities necessary to thrive. We were hoping that members of the state Joint Finance Committee hearing were listening to the messages that Wisconsinites traveled around the state to impart to them, that our budget must reflect the goals and values of the communities that it serves, but they weren't. And tomorrow we will be slapped in the face with the removal of all of these good proposals in this budget that will move the state forward. If only our elected officials had the courage to put aside their ideology and their partisan politics and act in the best interest of the people who are most impacted by these issues in our governor's budget. And so with that, I encourage folks to call the numbers that my colleague Molly Collins placed in the Facebook chat. Email those elected officials. If you're able to join Expo and other coalition partners tomorrow in our state capitol, please do. If you can't, share on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok, whatever platform you're on. and make sure that you stay involved, that stay informed, and hold our elected officials accountable. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Until next time, peace out.